Hello, my name is Maria Jolicoeur. Welcome to my show, Let's Talk About History. Today, I'd like to talk about a true story of Venture Smith. Venture Smith was born circa 1729, and he was brought here from Africa, and he became a successful businessman. Venture Smith's birth name was Bratier Furrow. He was born in circa 1729 and he died in 1805. He was captured when he was 6.5 years old, a boy in West Africa, and was taken to Anamabo on the Gold Coast, today Ghana, to be sold as a slave. As an adult in Rhode Island, Connecticut, he purchased his freedom and that of his family. He documented his life in a narrative, The Life and Adventures of Venture, of native Africa, but resident in life and adventures of Venture, a native of Africa, about 60 years in the United States of America, related to himself. This autobiography is one of the earliest known examples of an autobiographical narrative in entirely African American literary veracas. Only about a dozen left behind first-hand documents of their experiences. Smith inherited the name Venture from Robinson Mumford, who was his first white enslaver. Mumford decided to call him Venture because he considered purchasing him to be a business venture. Mumford Venture with 4 gallons of rum and a piece of calico. After regaining his freedom, Smith adopted his last name from Oliver Smith, his last enslaver. In his narrative, Smith describes his people in his native country as having been generally of great bodily stature, stout and tall, and he reports that he personally was well over 6.5 inches tall, weighed 300 pounds, and carried a 9-pound axe for felling trees. This is confirmed by an archaeological project in 2007 in the Runaway Ad from 1754. Venture Smith died in 1805. He is buried at the First Church of Christ Cemetery in East Haddam, Connecticut, now a site of the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Early life. Bratier Venture Smith was born in a place he recalls as Jolicoeur in Guinea, a term that at the time referred to much of West Africa. Jolicoeur, argues Chandler B. Saint, a historian with the documenting Venture Smith project, was probably in the Savannah region. Holman Ayres map of Guinea. His father was Sango Furrow, the Prince of Jolicoeur. His mother was the first of 3 wives, and Bratier was the first of her 3 children. She left Sango Furrow's village after he married another wife without her permission. Although polygamy was not uncommon in that country, especially among the rich, as every man was allowed to keep as many wives as he could maintain. She took her 3 children with her, traveling 40 miles over 40 days. The group relied on foraging for food. The young Bratier was left in the care of a wealthy farmer, while his mother, her home country. While at his farm, Bratier was tasked with caring for the owner's flock of 40 sheep. He remained on the farm for about a year before his father sent him to emissary to retrieve him. 6 weeks after he returned to his father's village, Bratier learned that the country of the farmer he had just left had been invaded by a large foreign army. The nation had not prepared for war in a long time, hence the villagers had to evacuate. Segaforo agreed to give aid in the form of providing a safe haven. Shortly after refuge arrived, an enemy messenger arrived and demanded the payment of a large sum of money, 300 fat cattle, and a great number of goats, sheep, asses, etc. The threat of invasion and war was enough for Singapore to agree to the terms. Fort William, the 1890s, despite paying the enemy what had what they had asked for, Singapore village was attacked by a force of 6,000 men. Rotier, his family, and the entire village fled on the way. Singapore discovered a scouting party of the enemy and he discharged arrows at them. They were all soon captured. Singapore was interrogated because the invaders knew that he had money. He was tortured to death for refusing to reveal the location of the money. Then this event stuck with Brochier for the rest of his life. The shocking sense to this day, fresh in his mind, I have often been overcome with thinking on it. The invaders forced captives to march about 1,000 miles to Balagasco in the coast, while at the same time the raiding force captured more Africans. In a turn of events, the captors are attacked and defeated by a local raiding party. Instead of being set free, he remained in bondage and continued his journey towards the coast and eventually arrived at the British slave trading castle and dungeon of Anamabo, Fort William, aka Fort William, on the Gold Coast, today's Ghana. In the late spring of 1739, the ship sailed from Anamabo to Barbados with 260 captives and then to Rhode Island. On board, Brochier was purchased by Robinson Mumford of Rhode Island for 4 gallons of rum and a piece of calico and renamed Venture. During the middle passage of Barbados, a smallpox outbreak took the lives of 60 of his fellow captives. While most of the surviving captives were sold in Barbados, he was brought to New England. A slave in British colonial America. Smith relays in his narrative that upon the ship's arrival in Barbados, all but 4 of the slaves were sold to the planters. On August 23, 1739, Smith and 3 others sailed on to Rhode Island, arriving in the fall of 1739. Afterwards, Smith went to live at Mumford's residence on Fisher Island, New York. Once there, he worked in the household. At this time, he showed his loyalty to his master. When he received the keys of trunks, he did not give them others even to the master's father asked him to do so. Because of his work, his master increasingly trusted him. He served his master dutifully and was praised highly after faithfully guarding the contents of his master's chest for an extended period of time. Nevertheless, he was subjected to intense back-breaking labor at a young age and severe punishment. His master's son, in particular, tormented him and abused him, and one time attempted to beat him with a pitchfork, and ultimately tied him up and whipped him for his defiance. As he grew older, he endured more arduous tasks and severe punishments. In his narrative, Smith recalls his initial experience with his first white masters, who possessed abundant fertile land near the river. He mentions how his landlord had a tender heart and treated him well, and the landlord's son and Smith even had something remotely similar to friendship. At the age of 22, Smith married another slave named Meg Margaret. Shortly thereafter, on search, wait a minute, I have to get a drink of water. Excuse me. Sorry. Shortly thereafter, on March 27, 1754, he made an escape attempt. Convinced to take flight by an Irish indentured servant named Hetty and two other Montford slaves, during their escape at Montauk Point, Long Island, Hetty reveals his true intentions and attempts to steal their supplies and all their belongings. After discovering this treachery, Smith and his compatriots hunt down and capture Hetty and return him to his master, receiving a warm welcome and appreciation for their efforts. In 1754, Smith and his wife had a daughter called Hannah. Less than a month later, Smith was separated from his family when he was sold to Thomas Stanton at Stonington Point, Connecticut. They were reunited the following year when Stanton bought Meg and Hannah. After Smith had begun saving money that he had earned from working outside jobs and selling produce, he hoped to buy freedom for his family. His time in the service of the Stantons began peacefully, but he was thrown into discord after Smith found his wife and the wife of Thomas Stanton in a heated dispute, with the latter beating upon the former with a switch. When Smith tried to break up the fight, Mr. Stanton turned the switch upon him, and so Smith took it from her grasp and threw it into the fire. In retaliation for this, Thomas Stanton attacked Smith seemingly out of the blue with a boat oar. After fending off this attack, a vexed Smith went to local authorities to complain about his abuse. Stanton and his brother, who had come to do violence unto Smith for his rebellion, received a harsh warning and were publicly humiliated. In revenge for this, the brothers once again assaulted Smith once they were out of sight of the courthouse and were once again overcome and repulsed by Smith. I became enraged at this and immediately turned them both under me, laid one of them across the other, and stamped both with my feet that I would. This occasioned my master's brother to advise him to put me off. Due to the tumultuous series of events, Smith determined to leave the service of the Stantons. The Smiths had two more children, Solomon in 1756 and Cuff in 1761. Smith sold twice more. In 1760, he ended up with Captain Oliver Smith, who agreed to let him buy his freedom. Smith let Venture work for money when his labor was not required at home. Venture Smith tried to earn money by going out to work. Finally, in the spring of 1765, Venture Smith purchased his freedom for 71 pounds and 2 shillings, a notably exorbitant price. A free man, Smith moved to Long Island. In 1769, after cutting wood and investing the money he made, Smith purchased a son, Solomon and Cuff. He earned money to purchase a son by cutting and cording wood, of which he said he dipped upwards of 400 cords in threshing out 75 bushels of grain over the course of 6 months. To purchase the sons, he paid $200 each. He then purchased a black slave for 40 pounds and gave him 60 pounds, but the man ran away, still owing Smith 40 pounds. He hired out Solomon, his oldest son, to Charles Church for 1 year to be paid 12 pounds. Solomon, being 17 years of age and of an able body, was as dictated by Smith, all my hope and dependence for help. During his year of employment, Church had outfitted a whaling boat and convinced the young Solomon to join in. In return, he would be compensated with his normal wages and a bonus of a pair of silver buckles. When Smith caught word of the expedition, he set off in an attempt to stop his son from putting out to sea. And when he arrived at Church's house, he could only see the boat on the horizon. Smith would never again see his oldest son because while on the expedition, he caught scurvy and died. Soon after the death of his son, Smith purchased his wife for 40 pounds. He did this expeditiously as she was then pregnant with his unborn child. If she had given birth before he was able to purchase her, he would have had to buy both his wife and his child separately. After welcoming another son, Smith named him Solomon in memory of his deceased eldest son. Smith experienced multiple financial and personal setbacks. He bought a Negro man for $400. However, he wanted to return to his old master, so Smith released him. Venture Smith purchased another Negro man for 25 pounds. After his daughter Hannah was married, she had come down with an illness. However, her husband did not pay adequate attention to her health. Although Smith nursed her, she died. In addition, 2 of his slaves ran away, even though he paid a lot of money. In his early 60s, he was unjustly charged with the loss of a white man's property and charged for 10 pounds while visiting New London. Although being absent from the scene with witnesses, he was still prosecuted. Smith then carried this matter to other courts, claiming his innocence. But the judgment was never reversed. This misleading judgment was made out of discrimination against Black people. Remembering this experience, he said, Captain Hart was a white gentleman and I a poor African. Therefore, it was all right and good enough for the Black. Well, don't mind me saying, but in his words, dog. I'm sorry if that offends anyone. But this is old. This is back in the 1700s, and that's how he felt he was being treated. In 1775, Smith bought a farm at Haddam Neck on the Salmon River in Connecticut. By 1778, he had expanded the initial 10 acres to form a farm of at least 130 acres. Additionally, he made a living by fishing, whaling, farming his land, and trading in the Long Island Basin. He lived the remainder of his life at Haddam Neck. He owned shipping fleets, I believe 3. In 1798, Smith dictated his life experiences with his family, had it printed by the Bee in New London, Connecticut. By this time, Venture was showing the signs of old age. His strong, tall body was bowed, and he was going blind. The narrative has been the subject of some contention regarded in many instances as whitewashed and inauthentic. It was suspected that the white editors manipulated Smith's story, a common practice among editors of slave narratives. After 4 conferences and numerous scholarly papers, it is the conclusion of most scholars in the documenting Venture Smith project and the narrative in entirely Venture Smith's own words. The work is entitled A Narrative of the Life and Adventures of Venture, a native of Africa, but resident from 60 years in the land of the United States of America. So Venture died a well-liked businessman, and he had white pallbearers at his funeral, and he was respected by the community. And if you get a chance to go to East Haddam, I hope you visit his grave, and it's there next to the church. And he was also known for being very strong. He was known for carrying a 300-pound rock and carrying it quite a distance. And that rock still stands on Pawcatuck, the road. I think it's past Foxwood as you go down into Pawcatuck. It's on the side of the road. So I hope you enjoyed my story today on my show, Let's Talk About History. And thank you for joining me.